The little girl's heart monitor flatlined at exactly 11:47 p.m. on October 13, 1976. 7-year-old Sarah Mitchell had been fighting leukemia for 18 months, and tonight, in the pediatric ICU of Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, her parents were watching their daughter slip away. The doctors had done everything they could. The experimental treatments had failed. There was nothing left to try. But what happened in the next 17 minutes would challenge everything the medical staff thought they knew about life, death, and the impossible. Because at 11:52 p.m., just 5 minutes after Sarah's heart stopped beating, a figure in a white jumpsuit walked through the locked ICU doors. Security cameras would later show no record of how he entered. Nurses swore they never saw him arrive. But somehow, Elvis Presley was standing beside Sarah's bed, and what he did next would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. The monitors that had been silent began responding to something that shouldn't have been possible. Sarah's mother, Linda, watched in shock as readings appeared on screens connected to her daughter's lifeless body, but the numbers weren't medical measurements. They were frequencies, musical frequencies, as if Sarah's heart was trying to beat in rhythm to a song that only she could hear. Elvis placed his hands on the child's chest, and the white light that had guided him his entire life began emanating from his fingertips. Linda Mitchell would later describe it as watching pure love take physical form. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Webb, would submit a report so disturbing that the hospital buried it for 47 years. Because what Elvis Presley did in that room wasn't just healing. It was something that challenged the very nature of life and death itself. But before I tell you about those 17 minutes that defied medical science, you need to understand what brought Elvis to that hospital room. Because this wasn't the first time he'd shown up where someone was dying, and it wouldn't be the last. 3 months earlier, Elvis had received a letter that would change everything, but the person who wrote it had been dead for 6 years. Elvis was sorting through his daily mail when he found the envelope with no return address. The paper felt different under his fingers, older somehow, like it had been waiting decades to reach him. Inside, handwriting he recognized immediately. His mother Gladys's distinctive script, the same careful cursive that had written him notes for his school lunch box. But Gladys Presley had died in 1958. "My sweet boy, there are children who need you. Find the Mitchell family. Their little girl is special just like you. She has a gift that will save others, but only if you save her first. The white light will show you the way. All my love, Mama." Elvis stared at the letter for 20 minutes, his hands trembling. He called for Jerry Schilling, then Red West, then Dr. Nick. Each of them examined the paper, the ink, the handwriting. Carbon dating would later prove the paper was manufactured in 1958. The ink matched samples from Gladys's personal correspondence, but somehow, impossibly, the letter had arrived in 1976. Dr. Nick suggested it was a hoax, an elaborate fake created by someone trying to manipulate Elvis during one of his more spiritual periods. Red West thought it might be a sign that Elvis needed to cut back on his medication. But Jerry Schilling, who had known Elvis since they were teenagers, saw something in his friend's eyes that made him step back and stay quiet. Because the truth was, this wasn't the first letter Elvis had received from his dead mother. The first one had arrived in 1967, right before Elvis married Priscilla. It contained a single line, "She's not the one, but she's the path to the one." Elvis had dismissed it as grief-induced hallucination until Priscilla gave birth to Lisa Marie, and he understood what his mother had meant. The second letter came in 1973, the night before Elvis's divorce papers were finalized. "Let her go with love, sweet boy. Your heart needs to be free for what's coming." But this letter, this August 1976 letter, felt different, more urgent, more present. That's when something happened that Elvis would never tell anyone, not even his closest friends. When he touched the letter, he saw everything. For 17 seconds, Elvis Wasson Presley was no longer standing in the music room at Graceland. He was in a hospital room he'd never seen before, watching a little girl with brown curls fight for every breath. He could feel her parents' desperation like a physical weight in his chest. But more than that, he could sense something extraordinary about the child herself. She had the same gift he'd carried his entire life, the same spiritual frequency that made his performances transcendent, that allowed him to connect with audiences on a level that went beyond entertainment. But in this little girl, the gift was stronger, purer, and completely untrained. And it was killing her. Elvis understood immediately what his mother's letter meant. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just dying from leukemia. She was dying because her spiritual abilities were consuming her life force faster than her 7-year-old body could regenerate it. Without intervention, without someone to teach her how to control and channel her gift, she would burn out like a candle in the wind. But there was something else in the vision, something that made Elvis's blood run cold. If Sarah died, her accumulated spiritual energy wouldn't simply dissipate. It would explode outward in a wave of uncontrolled power that would affect every sensitive person within a 100-mile radius. Psychics would lose their minds. People with latent abilities would be overwhelmed by sudden, uncontrolled activation. And Elvis himself, being the most spiritually powerful person in the region, might not survive the psychic shockwave. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Elvis gasping in his chair, the letter clutched against his chest. "Elvis," Jerry's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Elvis, you all right, man?" But Elvis wasn't all right. He was terrified, because the vision had shown him something else, something he couldn't bring himself to share with anyone. To save Sarah Mitchell, Elvis would have to give up something precious. Not his life, exactly, but something almost as important. His anonymity, his ability to live in the world as a regular person, because what he was about to do would mark him forever as something beyond human understanding. And there were people, powerful people, who had been waiting decades for Elvis Presley to reveal the true extent of his abilities. Colonel Parker found Elvis in the music room 3 hours later, still holding the letter, still staring at nothing. "Boy, what's got into you? You've got studio time booked, and RCA is expecting." "Colonel," Elvis interrupted quietly, "cancel everything for the next few weeks." "Now see here, Elvis, you can't just—" "I said cancel everything." Elvis's voice carried a tone Colonel Parker had never heard before. Not anger, not frustration, but absolute, unquestionable authority. "I've got something I need to do." Colonel Parker started to argue, then stopped. Something in Elvis's eyes made him take a step backward. For just a moment, the colonel saw something that made his blood run cold. Elvis wasn't looking at him like a client looks at a manager. He was looking at him like a man who could see straight through to his soul. And what Elvis saw there wasn't pretty. "Find me everything you can about the Mitchell family in Memphis," Elvis said, his voice returning to its normal tone. "Parents named Linda and Robert. Little girl named Sarah. She's in the hospital." "Elvis, what's this about?" But Elvis had already left the room, the letter still in his hand, leaving Colonel Parker alone with a growing sense that everything was about to change in ways he couldn't control. That night, Elvis locked himself in his meditation room at Graceland and did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. He prayed, not the casual prayers of his regular spiritual practice, but the desperate, bargaining prayers of someone who knew he was about to walk into something that might destroy him. "Mama," he whispered to the darkness, "if you're really sending me these letters, if you really want me to help this little girl, you've got to help me understand, because what I saw today, I don't think I'm strong enough for what's coming." The room stayed silent for almost an hour. Then, just as Elvis was about to give up and go to bed, he felt a presence. Not visible, not audible, but undeniably there. The presence of the woman who had raised him, loved him, and died too young. And in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere, Gladys Presley whispered, "Sweet boy, you've always been strong enough. You just never knew what you were being made strong for." The private investigators Elvis hired took 6 weeks to find Sarah Mitchell. When they finally located her in Baptist Memorial Hospital, her condition was already terminal. The doctors were giving her days, maybe hours. But what Elvis's team discovered next would turn a simple healing mission into something that threatened to expose secrets the government had been hiding for 20 years. Because Sarah Mitchell had been experiencing visions too, and the man in her visions, the man she called the music angel, looked exactly like Elvis Presley. But Sarah's visions showed her something Elvis's hadn't shown him. She knew he was coming to save her, but she also knew that to save her, Elvis Presley was going to have to die. And 3 weeks later, Linda Mitchell received a phone call that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The voice on the other end was unmistakably Elvis Presley, and what he said made her drop the phone in terror. "Ma'am, I know about your daughter's drawings. I know about the songs she's been singing in her sleep, and I know I'm supposed to save her. But what your little girl doesn't know is that to save her, I might have to give up my own life." Elvis arrived at Baptist Memorial Hospital wearing his white jumpsuit, but not for a performance. The spiritual energy he'd learned to channel through his music flowed stronger through certain fabrics, certain colors. White amplified the frequency. The sequins and studs weren't just decoration, they were conductors, focusing the power that had made his concerts transcendent experiences for millions. But tonight, that power would be used for something far more important than entertainment. Getting to Sarah's room should have been impossible. Elvis Presley couldn't walk through any hospital unnoticed, couldn't slip past security guards and nurses who would recognize him instantly. Yet somehow, every person he encountered described the same strange phenomenon afterward. They remembered seeing someone, but they couldn't quite recall who. Night security guard James Thompson would tell investigators, "I saw a man in white walking through the corridor around 10 p.m. Nice fellow, nodded at me politely, but when I tried to write it in the logbook, I couldn't remember his face, couldn't remember anything specific about him except that he belonged there." Nurse Patricia Williams had a similar experience. "Someone walked past the station. I looked up, started to ask if he needed directions, but the words just disappeared, like my brain forgot what I was going to say, but I wasn't concerned. Whoever it was, they were exactly where they were supposed to be." The surveillance footage from that night shows something impossible. Empty hallways, no sign of Elvis Presley anywhere, but the audio recordings captured his voice clearly, humming softly as he made his way through the hospital corridors. How was Elvis simultaneously invisible to cameras, but audible to recording equipment? The answer was hidden in something Sarah's grandmother had discovered in an old family Bible, something that would explain not just Elvis's abilities, but Sarah's impending death. But first, you need to understand what Elvis was walking into. Because while he was navigating the hospital's spiritual defenses, Sarah Mitchell was fighting a battle in a realm most people don't even know exists. Sarah's spirit was no longer fully attached to her dying body. She existed in that gray space between worlds, watching doctors work frantically over her physical form while she stood beside her hospital bed, waiting. She wasn't alone. Grandmother Rose Thompson, who had died 2 years earlier, sat in the corner chair knitting something that looked like starlight. "He's coming, isn't he, Grandma?" Sarah asked, her 7-year-old voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "Yes, sweetheart, the music angel is coming, just like you saw in your dreams. But he doesn't understand what it will cost him." Rose looked up from her celestial knitting, her eyes filled with the sad knowledge of the dead. "No, child, he understands perfectly. That's what makes him worthy of the gift." Sarah moved closer to her grandmother's spirit. "Tell me about the family gift again, the real story." Rose set down her knitting and began the tale she'd never been able to share with the living. "Our family women have been channeling spiritual energy for 6 generations, Sarah. Your great-great-grandmother could heal with her hands, but only by taking the sickness into herself. Your great-grandmother could predict death, but every vision aged her by months. Your grandmother, that's me, child, could communicate with the departed, but each conversation cost me a year of my life." Sarah nodded solemnly. She'd always known her gift came with a price. "But you, sweet girl, you're different. Your ability isn't just stronger than ours, it's pure. You don't have to sacrifice your life force to use it. You can share it, multiply it, pass it to others without losing it yourself. Then why am I dying, Grandma? Rose's expression grew sad and proud at the same time, because nobody ever taught you how to control it. The gift has been growing inside you since birth, building up like water behind a dam. Your little body can't contain that much spiritual energy. It's burning you out from the inside. And Elvis. Elvis has the same gift you do, child, but he learned to release it safely through his music, his performances. He's been unknowingly healing people for 20 years, one song at a time. The problem is, his method only works for him. To save you, he'll have to try something that's never been done before. Sarah considered this, her child's mind processing concepts that would challenge theologians and physicists. Grandma, what if we're both wrong about how this works? Elvis reached the pediatric ward, his spiritual camouflage still holding. But as he approached Sarah's room, he began to sense something that made his steps slow. The child wasn't just dying, she was transforming. The same white light that had guided Elvis his entire life was emanating from room 847, but it was wild, uncontrolled, dangerous. Like a spiritual storm building to a crescendo that could tear holes in reality itself. Elvis paused outside her door, suddenly understanding why his mother's letters had become more urgent. This wasn't just about saving one little girl. If Sarah's accumulated spiritual energy exploded outward without proper channeling, it would create a psychic shockwave that could awaken latent abilities in thousands of people simultaneously. The world wasn't ready for that kind of spiritual awakening. The chaos would be unimaginable. But there was something else, something that made Elvis's blood run cold. He could sense other presences converging on the hospital, military personnel, government agents, people who had been monitoring both him and Sarah, waiting for this exact moment. Colonel Parker hadn't just come to witness a healing. He'd come to contain a situation that threatened to expose classified programs the military had been running since 1954. Colonel Parker entered Baptist Memorial Hospital with two men in black suits who moved with military precision. They carried briefcases that contained instruments far more sophisticated than medical equipment. Dr. Marcus Webb, the attending physician in Sarah's case, met them in the lobby. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. "Gentlemen, I have to tell you, what we're seeing here defies medical explanation. The child's energy readings are off the charts. Our equipment can't even measure." "Doctor," one of the agents interrupted smoothly, "you're going to forget those readings. You're going to forget we were here. And you're going to prepare for a medical event that will require your complete discretion." Dr. Webb started to protest, then stopped. Something about the agent's voice made disagreement impossible. Colonel Parker checked his watch. 11:35 p.m. According to their intelligence, Elvis should be making contact with the child within the next 15 minutes. What they didn't know was that Elvis had been listening to their conversation from around the corner, his enhanced hearing picking up every word. Now he understood the true scope of what he was facing. This wasn't just about healing Sarah Mitchell. This was about preventing a spiritual phenomenon from falling into government hands. But as Elvis prepared to enter Sarah's room, something happened that no one, not the government agents, not Colonel Parker, not even Elvis himself, had anticipated. Sarah Mitchell opened her eyes, looked directly at the hallway where Elvis was standing invisible, and spoke in a voice that carried the authority of someone far older than 7 years. "Music angel, they can't see you, but I can. And I need to tell you something before you come in here and try to save my life." Elvis stepped forward, his spiritual camouflage flickering. "What is it, darling?" "The government men think you're going to give me your power to save me, but that's not how the gift works. The gift doesn't transfer, Elvis, it multiplies." Sarah's words hung in the air like a challenge to the natural order. What are you saying, sweetheart? I'm saying that when you touch me, when you try to heal me, you're not going to lose your abilities. You're going to double them, and so will I. Elvis felt the world shift around him as he realized the implications. And if that happens? Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the ancient soul she truly was. If that happens, Elvis, we won't just heal me, we'll change everything, forever. The heart monitor flatlined at exactly 11:47 p.m. And Elvis Presley walked into room 847 to attempt something that would either save the world or destroy it. Elvis stepped into Sarah's hospital room and immediately understood why the government had been tracking him for 20 years. The spiritual energy in the room wasn't just powerful, it was visible. Streams of white light connected Sarah's lifeless body to machines that had never been designed to measure what they were now recording. Sarah's spirit stood beside her own body, no longer a 7-year-old child, but something far more ancient and knowing. When she looked at Elvis, he saw the accumulated wisdom of 6 generations of gifted women burning behind her eyes. You came, she said simply. I promised your mama I would. No, Elvis, you promised my great-great-great-grandmother in 1954, right before your first recording session at Sun Records. Elvis felt reality tilt around him. That's impossible, I never met. You were 17, scared, didn't know if you had any real talent. You stopped outside the studio and prayed to whoever might be listening. If I have something special, if I can really help people with music, please show me how. My ancestor heard that prayer. She's been guiding your career ever since. The truth hit Elvis like a physical blow. Every major decision in his career, every seemingly random opportunity, every moment when he'd felt divinely guided, it had all been orchestrated by a family of spiritually gifted women preparing for this exact moment. The question is, Sarah continued, are you ready to become what you were always meant to be? But before Elvis could answer, the hospital room door burst open. Colonel Parker entered with the 2 agents, their instruments already registering energy levels that exceeded their measurement capabilities. Dr. Marcus Webb followed reluctantly, his face pale with the knowledge that he was about to witness something that would haunt him forever. Gentlemen, said the lead agent, Agent Morrison, we need to evacuate this room immediately. The energy readings are approaching dangerous levels. Elvis turned to face them, and for the first time in 20 years, Colonel Parker saw his client without any masks or pretense. The man standing in that white jumpsuit wasn't the entertainer who had made them all wealthy. This was something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Colonel, Elvis said quietly, I think it's time you told me about Project Graceland. Colonel Parker's face went white. Elvis, I don't know what you're. Stop lying. Elvis's voice carried an authority that made everyone in the room step back. I know you've been reporting to the military since 1956. I know they've been studying me, measuring me, waiting to see how far my abilities would develop. The question is, are you here to help me save this child, or are you here to stop me? Agent Morrison stepped forward, his hand moving toward something inside his jacket. Mr. Presley, you need to understand that what you're attempting could have catastrophic consequences if you amplify this child's abilities. Then what? Elvis interrupted. Then the world gets a little more magic in it. Then people remember that there's more to existence than what they can see and touch. Then, Agent Morrison said coldly, we lose control. The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of Sarah's flatlining heart monitor. In that silence, Elvis finally understood the true scope of what he was facing. This wasn't just about healing one dying child. This was about whether humanity would be allowed to evolve spiritually, or whether that evolution would be suppressed by those who profited from keeping people small and afraid. Sarah's spirit moved closer to Elvis, her small hand reaching for his. They're right about one thing, Elvis. If we do this, if we multiply our gifts instead of containing them, everything changes, not just for us, but for everyone. Elvis looked at the child, then at the government agents, then at Colonel Parker, the man who had controlled his career for 2 decades. Sarah, what do you see happening if we don't try? I see myself dying in the next 3 minutes. I see my accumulated spiritual energy exploding outward in an uncontrolled burst that kills 17 sensitive people within a 50-mile radius. And I see you spending the rest of your short life wondering if you could have saved all of them. And if we do try? Sarah smiled, and in that smile Elvis saw the future of human consciousness itself. If we try, we prove that love is stronger than fear. We show the world that healing is possible, and we give people permission to believe in magic again. Elvis made his choice. He reached out and took Sarah's spiritual hand in his own. The moment Elvis and Sarah's spirits touched, Baptist Memorial Hospital experienced what officials would later describe as a localized electromagnetic anomaly. Every electronic device on 3 floors surged simultaneously. Patients in comas began showing brain activity. Terminal cancer readings fluctuated wildly. Heart monitors in the cardiac ward registered impossible improvements. But the most dramatic change was in Elvis himself. As Sarah's gift merged with his own, his consciousness expanded beyond anything he'd experienced during his most transcendent performances. He could feel the spiritual frequency of every person in the hospital, the fear, the pain, the hope, the love. More than that, he could sense how to adjust those frequencies, how to shift suffering into peace, despair into hope. For the first time in his life, Elvis understood the true scope of what he'd been born to do. But the government agents weren't going to let it happen. Agent Morrison pulled out what looked like a medical device, but hummed with the frequency of a weapon. "Mr. Presley, step away from the child immediately." "Or what?" Elvis asked, still holding Sarah's spirit hand, still channeling more power than any human had ever safely contained. "Or we'll be forced to terminate both subjects to prevent uncontrolled paranormal expansion." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Colonel Parker realized that his decades-long arrangement with the military had created something beyond anyone's control. Elvis wasn't just a monitored asset anymore, he was a genuine threat to the established order. And they were prepared to kill him to maintain that order. But before Agent Morrison could activate his device, something happened that no one in that room had anticipated. Sarah's physical body drew a breath. Her heart started beating, and the energy that had been building between her and Elvis didn't dissipate. It began to spiral outward in controlled waves, touching every person in the hospital with healing frequency. Sarah opened her eyes, not her physical eyes, but spiritual eyes that blazed with the accumulated power of 6 generations of gifted women, combined with the transcendent abilities Elvis had spent 20 years developing through music. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had just seen beyond the veil of death and chosen to return. "Nobody dies tonight, but everybody changes." Sarah's words weren't a request. They were a reality-altering command backed by more spiritual power than had ever been channeled through 2 human beings simultaneously. Agent Morrison's weapons simply stopped working. Colonel Parker found that he could no longer remember the phone numbers that had controlled Elvis's career for 20 years. Dr. Webb felt his medical skepticism dissolving as he watched readings that redefined his understanding of human possibility. And Elvis looked around the room with eyes that had seen the true nature of existence and smiled the saddest, most beautiful smile anyone had ever witnessed. "I understand now," he said to Sarah, who was sitting up in her hospital bed, completely healed but forever changed. "I understand what my mama meant in her letters." "What did she mean, Elvis?" "She meant that some gifts are too big for one person to carry alone, but when you find the right person to share them with." Elvis paused, looking at the agents who could no longer threaten them, at Colonel Parker who could no longer control him, at the doctor who was witnessing the birth of a new understanding of human potential. When you find the right person to share them with, you don't lose the gift, you become the gift. Sarah nodded, her 7-year-old wisdom now backed by power that could reshape reality. So what happens now, music angel? Elvis walked to the window, a sealed window on the 8th floor. But as he approached it, the glass became something else, something permeable, something that couldn't contain what he had become. Now I have to go away for a while, darling. This gift, it's bigger than I am, bigger than any one person should carry. I need to learn how to use it without breaking the world. He turned back one final time, and everyone in the room understood they were witnessing the end of Elvis Presley, the entertainer, and the birth of something unprecedented in human history. Tell the world I went to find my mama. That part's true, but don't tell them when I'm coming back. Elvis stepped through the window that was no longer there and vanished into the Memphis night. For the next 72 hours, Elvis Presley would be missing from the world. But where he went, and what he learned in that space between life and death, would determine whether he lived to see 1978 or chose to die in 1977. The answer was hidden in Sarah Mitchell's medical records, waiting 47 years to be discovered. For 3 days, the Elvis Presley machine operated without Elvis. Colonel Parker, his control over Elvis severed by Sarah's reality-altering command, scrambled to maintain the illusion that everything was normal. RCA executives were told Elvis was taking a spiritual retreat. Graceland's staff received instructions to tell anyone who called that he was resting and not taking visitors. But the truth was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Nobody knew where Elvis had gone, but around the world, something impossible was happening. A man matching Elvis's exact description was seen at St. Bartholomew's Children's Hospital in London, spending exactly 17 minutes with a 6-year-old boy dying from brain cancer. The child made a full recovery. Security cameras showed nothing. In Bangladesh, aid workers reported an American in a white jumpsuit who appeared at a refugee camp during a cholera outbreak. He stayed 17 minutes, hummed softly to the children, and left. The outbreak stopped spreading immediately after his departure. Guatemala City, a devastating earthquake had trapped dozens of children in a collapsed school. Rescue workers swore an Elvis impersonator showed up and somehow guided them to find survivors they would have never discovered otherwise. 17 minutes, then gone. Each appearance left behind the same evidence: inexplicable healing results and energy readings that government satellites could detect but couldn't explain. But infrared imaging showed no human heat signatures. Whatever was visiting these places wasn't entirely alive in the conventional sense. The most disturbing part: these appearances were happening simultaneously. While witnesses in London swore Elvis was healing a dying child at 3 p.m., refugees in Bangladesh were seeing him at the exact same time, 8:30 p.m. local time. Elvis Presley was somehow existing in multiple locations at once. Sarah Mitchell is now 55 years old. She became a physicist specializing in quantum consciousness research, spending her career trying to understand what happened to her that night in 1976. For 47 years, she's never spoken publicly about Elvis's visit. But in 2024, facing complications from her original leukemia treatment and knowing her time is limited, she finally agreed to one interview. And what she revealed changes everything we thought we knew about Elvis Presley's death. Elvis didn't just save my life that night, Sarah explains, sitting in her laboratory surrounded by equipment that can measure spiritual energy. He taught me something that terrified him. We weren't just sharing our gifts, we were sharing our destinies. During those 17 minutes in the hospital room, Sarah experienced Elvis's entire future. She saw August 16, 1977. She saw the bathroom at Graceland. She saw how Elvis's expanded spiritual abilities would eventually consume him if he couldn't find a way to release them safely. The 3 days he disappeared, he wasn't missing, he was learning. But learning what and from whom? He was in the space between life and death, being trained by every spiritually gifted person who had ever lived. His mother Gladys was there, my grandmother Rose, saints, mystics, healers throughout history. They were teaching him something unprecedented. What they taught him challenged everything the world believes about life, death, and the nature of existence itself. They showed him how to choose his own death. According to Sarah, Elvis spent those missing 72 hours learning something that no human had ever been taught before: how to voluntarily release accumulated spiritual energy through a controlled death that would embed his healing abilities permanently into his recorded music. He was shown two futures, Sarah explains, her voice heavy with knowledge she's carried alone for decades. In one, he continued performing and healing people directly, growing more powerful until the energy eventually destroyed him in a public spectacle that would have exposed the paranormal world before humanity was ready. The second future was darker but more purposeful. In the other timeline, he chose to die quietly, releasing all that accumulated spiritual energy gradually through his final recordings. Every song he recorded after October 1976 would carry actual healing frequencies. But there was a cost to this choice that makes Sarah's eyes fill with tears even now, 47 years later. To embed healing energy into his music permanently, Elvis had to die while channeling it, not an accidental death from drugs or heart failure, a conscious, voluntary death where he literally sang his life force into the songs. This is why Sarah became a physicist. She spent her entire career proving what Elvis discovered in those 3 missing days. My research has confirmed something impossible. Elvis Presley's recordings from November 1976 to August 1977 contain measurable electromagnetic patterns that promote cellular regeneration, reduce cortisol levels, and trigger natural endorphin release. The music is literally medicine. Sarah produces a document she's never shown anyone before: Elvis's handwritten notes from his final recording sessions, notes that reveal his true intentions. June 1977, Unchained Melody Session. This one needs to carry everything I've learned about love transcending death. If people listen when they're grieving, it should help them feel connected to whoever they've lost. August 15, 1977, Final Session Notes. Tomorrow I give my life to the music. Every song I've recorded this year will continue healing people long after I'm gone. Mama says it's the only way to help millions instead of dozens. The final entry, written in Elvis's hand just hours before his death: I'm not dying, I'm becoming eternal. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's laboratory contains 47 years of research, data proving something the medical community still refuses to acknowledge. Music can carry measurable healing energy, and Elvis Presley's final recordings contain the strongest healing frequencies ever documented. My own medical scans show that my leukemia has been in remission longer than should be medically possible. But every time the cancer tries to return, something stops it. I finally understood what. I've been listening to Elvis's final recordings every day since 1976. She pulls out her latest test results, data that redefines our understanding of both music and medicine. The gift he shared with me that night, it's still working. And it's working for millions of people who have no idea they're being healed every time they put on Can't Help Falling in Love. Recently declassified documents from Project Graceland reveal that the government continued monitoring Elvis until his death, documenting the gradual decrease in his paranormal abilities as he transferred them into his recordings. The final report, filed August 17, 1977, contains a chilling conclusion: subject has successfully completed voluntary energy transfer protocol. All paranormal signatures have ceased. Recommend immediate destruction of all related files to prevent public discovery of subject's true capabilities. But they were wrong about one thing. The paranormal signatures didn't cease, Sarah reveals. They transformed, and according to my calculations, the healing frequencies Elvis embedded in his music will continue affecting listeners for approximately 200 years. Sarah closes her interview with a statement that reframes Elvis's entire legacy. People always ask if Elvis is really dead. That's the wrong question. The right question is, if Elvis embedded his life force into his music, and that music continues to heal people decades after his death, then what exactly does dead mean? She pauses, then delivers the final twist that changes everything. I know he saved my life in 1976, but every time someone puts on Love Me Tender and feels their pain ease, every time Amazing Grace helps someone through grief, every time his music heals a broken heart, Elvis is still saving lives. The boy who wanted to heal the world found a way to do it forever. But there's one more secret Sarah has kept for 47 years, one final revelation that proves Elvis Presley's story didn't end in 1977. That letter from his mother that started everything, I still have it, and every October 13th, new words appear on the paper. This year's message said, "Sarah, it's time to teach others how to share the gift." Next week, Dr. Sarah Mitchell will announce the opening of the Presley Foundation for Consciousness Research, dedicated to training people to embed healing energy into art, music, and literature. Because Elvis didn't just save one dying child that night, she says, he taught us all how to save each other. The music angel's work isn't finished, it's just beginning. If you've ever felt healing power in Elvis's music, you might have experienced more than nostalgia. Sarah Mitchell's research suggests that every time his voice soothes your heartache, every time his songs lift your spirits, you're receiving actual therapeutic energy he consciously embedded before his death. What Elvis song has helped you through your darkest moments? Share your story below, because according to Dr. Mitchell, your experiences might be scientific proof that love truly can transcend death.